You're listening to The Head Trash Show with me, Alexia Leachman, author of Clear Your Head Trash. Head Trash is the home to the Head Trash Clearance Method, which you can use to get rid of the fears, stresses and anxieties in your life. Every week I'll be sharing insights, stories and interviews to inspire you to clear your head trash so that you can find calmness, confidence and clarity in your life and work. To find out more about clearing head trash and creating a headspace, head over to clearyourheadtrash.com. And now for today's show. Hello and welcome to The Head Trash Show. My name is Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now on today's show we're going to be talking about COVID anxiety and more specifically how you can deal with COVID anxiety. Now there's a lot of anxiety going around right now. I don't know about you, but I seem to always be reading some kind of headline that's talking about how we're on the cusp of a mental health crisis and how so many people are feeling anxiety and anxiety symptoms where they didn't before. And a lot of this potentially is down to COVID. So I really wanted to kind of zoom in on this because there are things that we can do about it, but we can only start doing something about it if we really have an understanding of what it is. So that's what I want to talk about today. Now, there are various aspects of COVID that appear to be creating additional anxieties in people. Now, I want to make a distinction here between sort of regular anxiety or the anxiety that people have been experiencing anyway, and the anxiety that's come in as a result of COVID. So really thinking about some of those specific situations that we're living with that COVID has brought into our lives. So a lot of people, I don't know about you, but I certainly know a lot of people that have been struggling as a result of COVID. But what's really interesting is that you have some people that are experiencing less anxiety than before, and particularly those people that maybe were suffering from social anxiety, where being among people they didn't know, maybe the introverts, for example, or people that just were uncomfortable always having to go out and present themselves to the world, and now they've got an excuse to stay at home and to just be on their own, and they don't have this pressure that they're under, and so for them anxiety is kind of reduced. So this isn't for everybody by any means because we're all so different. So this episode really is for you if you find that you have been struggling with anxiety as a result of COVID and its arrival in our lives, which has been, goodness me, at least a year now. So we're really starting to, it's no longer novel. It's no longer this thing that we think, oh, we're going to get to the end, because it just seems to be going on and on and on. Now, the thing about anxiety is it just tends to make other stuff worse. Now, I've been working with anxiety and helping people to overcome anxiety for a long time now. And that is definitely something I've observed with the people I work with. It's that when you have anxiety, other things just tend to be more difficult. It's almost like it's a feeder for other conditions. So if your mental health felt a little bit delicate before COVID, well, it might be that now it's feeling like it's getting a little bit of a battering. And so this can make it even harder to deal with. So this is why I really want to share with you what my experience is and what I see as a way out of this, because if more of us can kind of reduce the anxiety that we're feeling, improve our mental health, then that can only be a good thing, right? So where do we start then? Well, the best place to start when tackling anxiety is to identify the various sources and basically just tackle them one by one. Now, when I'm working with people on overall anxiety, this can be quite a large remit, as I'm sure you can imagine. I mean, anxiety is pretty much an accumulation of all of these unresolved conflicts and stresses that have built up over our lives. And so when we come to untangle all of that, it can seem almost a little bit of a mountain. But when it comes to COVID, we've got some obvious places to start. So this makes COVID anxiety somewhat easier to resolve. So let's sort of talk through what the various aspects of COVID anxiety are. Now, to start with, there's COVID life. I've called it COVID life because it kind of encapsulates everything that COVID represents for us. It's this general sense of fear and anxiety that COVID is triggering in people. It's the sense of the restrictions, even the word COVID, and how it kind of brings up a level of fear or worry in people. There's the restrictions I've just mentioned, this loss of freedom, the lack of social interaction. It's all of this lumped into one. And I think it's important when we're looking at getting rid of our anxieties that we kind of are very clear what those things are. But also, as I work with head trash clearance, when we work with that method, it's always good to start at a general level and to kind of refine and get more specific as time goes on and the more clearance we do. And so this is why it's a good place to start, is particularly if you want to overcome your COVID anxieties using head trash clearance, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later on. So this is the general part, the COVID life. So if you imagine that you had one of those big blue IKEA bags of all that gathered up rubbish that you've picked up from around the floor when you're tidying your house, this is where you just put it all in. This is the COVID life bag. And when you're doing a clearance, using head trash clearance, you just imagine all of that stuff in there. But let's get more specific. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about here is wearing masks. Now, there are several aspects to wearing masks that cause anxiety. And in fact, it's a known cause of anxiety. There's a thing called mask anxiety. And I have got a blog post on this very topic because it's something that's been recognised by researchers and psychologists over the course of COVID. And so it does warrant, if wearing masks is an issue for you, then it does warrant taking a closer look at it. But let's just touch on what those aspects are. There's the physical feeling of wearing the mask and how it affects our breathing and our overall comfort levels. You know, some people report they feel dizzy or lightheaded when they've been wearing a mask for a while. I certainly feel that way. If I've been wearing mine for a while, I just don't feel right. I just want to take it off and sit down. It just really feels, unpleasant. But some people do report feelings of dizziness and lightheadedness. Now, of course, if you're wearing glasses, it's got the added unpleasantness of making your glasses all loads of condensation on the inside. I only notice this when I wear my sunglasses, but for those that are wearing glasses all the time, then this is going to be even more of an issue. Now, of course, when we think about those that maybe suffer from things like claustrophobia or, anything like that where they've been sort of trapped in small spaces or they feel uncomfortable around that, then wearing a mask could really be triggering for those people. And it will bring up those feelings of being trapped or suffocated, which could lead to things like panic attacks. I have spoken to people that have been survivors of abuse that have mentioned how they simply cannot wear a mask because it really does. It's too much for them and it really brings all of that back and does trigger a panic attack. So for people like that, they really simply wearing a mask is not even an option because it's too difficult for them. Now, the interesting thing around masks is it's quite polarizing because you've got a lot of people that are quite happy to wear masks and then there are those that aren't because of what it symbolizes. And so perhaps they disagree with the idea of masks. Maybe they have a health reason for not wearing them, like I've just mentioned. Those people with breathing difficulties are not going to be too comfortable wearing masks either. But whatever that reason is, there are going to be those people who are triggered by these mask rejectors, and that's what I'm going to call them for now, mask rejectors. And so they don't like the fact that there are people who aren't wearing a mask, these brazen people walking around not following the rules and putting everyone else at risk. And so this idea of what masks, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, can be very emotionally triggering. If you park the physicality of a mask and whether it's covering your mouth or not covering your mouth, there's the symbolism of wearing a mask that is also very triggering for people. And so you could have those people that look at other mask wearers and go, oh my goodness, look at them, they're just so obedient and they're not thinking for themselves, and they go off on their little rants. And then you've got those that see people who aren't wearing a mask that are equally feeling, well, that's so unfair, they're putting everyone else at risk, blah, blah, blah. And whichever side of the fence you're on, and I'm not taking sides here at all, I'm just recognising that the wearing of mask is quite contentious and can be quite difficult emotionally speaking, but also physically speaking. And so we need to do what we can to reduce this emotional impact, because if you are wearing a mask and it's stressing you out, it's making you anxious, it's bringing up panic attacks, there's a huge emotional component in there. But equally, if the sight of other people wearing or not wearing masks is making you angry, upset, argumentative, whatever, then there's an emotional component in there too. And so whatever is going on, there's always an emotional component going on, unless you're just not bothered whether people wear masks or not. You just, you wear them, you're happy to put it on, you're happy to take it off. You see other people wearing them, you're not bothered. You see people not wearing them, you're not bothered. I mean, there is a place there where it's not triggering anything in you physically or emotionally, in which case you're fine. You don't need to really look at this. But most people do have some kind of response to the idea of wearing masks. And it's this judgment that is potentially the work that we need to do when it comes to clearing head trash, as well as maybe the anxiety that comes up from the actual wearing of it, the physicality of it. So that's masks. I mean, I could talk a lot more about masks. As I said, I've got a blog post that dives more into the mask wearing anxiety, because it is something that is recognised by psychologists and researchers. But let's move on to health anxiety. Now, health anxiety, again, this could be a whole podcast episode all on its own. But I just want to kind of keep very specific here and think more about COVID and how it ties into COVID anxiety. When you have health anxiety, you do worry about being ill or catching something. And that tends to be this overarching anxiety that you carry with you everywhere in life. It's something that's recognised that people are quite happy to put their hands up and say they suffer from. And it was something that was affecting people well before COVID came along. But since COVID, it's kind of really ramped up quite significantly, because now there really is this thing that we can catch very readily and very easily, and that it seems to be everywhere. At least that's what the headlines are telling us. So this health anxiety does kind of ramp up a little bit. Now, a lot of the worry here is about getting ill. And then it's when you get ill, it's whether or not you're going to cope with being ill and whether they'll recover. This idea, like some people, like, I don't know, for me, for example, if I don't worry about getting ill because I have a belief that I'm going to just be able to recover and get better. So I don't worry about getting ill. But a lot of people do worry that if they catch something, they will not cope, they will not recover, they will suffer, they will be in pain, there will be discomfort, they might have to be in a hospital environment, which might carry a load of fear or anxiety for them. And so health is really tied into all of these other broader issues. And COVID is perfectly, sits perfectly in all of this, because we don't know if we were to catch COVID, whether we're going to get the serious version, the long version, or whatever, or whether we are just going to bat it away. Maybe we're going to have it and not even have any symptoms, but it's this not knowing of how it's going to affect us that makes it so difficult to deal with, and how it's everywhere. There's a sense that, you could catch it literally from anywhere in life. So this really does mean that the health aspect of COVID anxiety is quite significant. But you've also got the more hospital and medical fears that show up too. Things like people that have got fear of needles and injections, for example, or fear of being in a hospital, fear of doctors. All of those things can be difficult for people to handle, especially when you think about the vaccine and how that is affecting. If you've got fear of needles and injections, the idea of getting the vaccine is going to be difficult for you too. So this health one is a little, could be a Pandora's box if for some people at least, but that doesn't mean it's something that can't be dealt with. It absolutely can. And I've worked with people to help them overcome their health anxiety, even though it's not a focus of the work that I do. It comes up because we don't operate in silos. When we have our lives, we are all connected beings. And so I work holistically with people. If they come to me with one problem and something else comes up, then we expand our scope to make sure that that's dealt with too, because at the end of the day, I want the people I work with to get back to their happy place as quickly as possible and to stay there, right? You want to stay in your happy place. Okay, so now let's move on to another aspect, which may or may not be, relevant where you live, but it's lockdown boredom. Where I live, we went back into lockdown again recently. So suddenly, having had, lockdown last year, then we had freedoms, and then, it was all opening up, and then it got closed down again. And suddenly, like, oh my God, I can't go out. I've got to be home by 6. I've got to, you can't do anything. I've got to take a form if I go more than 10 kilometers, blah, blah, blah. All these kind of things. So, and when you are stuck at home, like one thing that happened to us recently when we were in lockdown is it was really, really bad rain. And I was stuck at home with 2 kids because my other half was away. So I was on the solo parenting stint. And then lockdown was announced. So I was homeschooling 2 kids on my own. And then, lockdown, homeschooling. And then we lost internet during a week of rain. So I was stuck indoors with no internet, which meant no Netflix, no Spotify, no anything like that, with 2 kids, and I couldn't kick them into the garden. So this lockdown boredom for me was really like, we were doing jigsaws. Oh, and let's do the same jigsaw again, and let's now race and do the jigsaws. How many things we do with the jigsaw? So it was kind of difficult. There are days there that are a little bit hard, let me say that. But, for those that are maybe on their own, that don't have anyone to deal with, to connect with, to talk to, this persistent long-term boredom has been very triggering for many people, and it's really sent them into a little bit of a rabbit hole of feelings of depressed, loss of energy, things that they would have previously enjoyed, like reading or like jigsaws. Taking the time out. When you're forced to do something like that, it doesn't kind of feel the same. It's all very nice to, take your book and go and sit in a corner and have a good hour and a half reading your book. But when that's all you can do, and it's like, oh, well, I'll read a book again, and I'm doing this for 6 hours a day, and maybe you prefer to just switch it up and do something else, but you can't, so you just go back to the book. And then it becomes a bit more stressful because it's your only choice. And when you have limited choices, then things that you previously enjoyed, things that you previously went to as your escape, they're no longer escapes. You're trapped in them. And they do things to you. When you're trapped in something as opposed to escaping to it, it carries a very different energy to it. And so this is what lockdown boredom has brought up for people. It's this sense of being trapped, these restrictions, this lack of choice. These are all of these things that come up for people when they've been faced with these persistent long-term lockdown situations. Again, I could talk a lot more about this, but I'm going to move on to the next one, which is social distancing and social anxiety. Now, one thing we've been hearing a lot really in the headlines is how many people are suffering from not having the social contact. And this is huge thing that's affecting people right now. But as I mentioned earlier, you've also got people going the other way. Those with social anxiety are feeling better because they don't have this pressure to be social all the time. But when it comes to social distancing, you've got this aspect, means we're not getting hugs, we're not getting touch, we're not getting contact, we're not doing all the things that are actually essential for human beings to thrive. We know that if babies don't get held in their first year of life, they don't get any hugs, and they don't grow in the same way. Some of them don't make it because hugging, touch, contact is an essential part of survival for us humans. And this social distancing has really cut that back for us. And so it can be very, very difficult for people to handle not getting that level of contact, that level of touch that we're used to having. And this can lead to feelings of being disconnected, isolated, feeling alone, being alone. And there's a difference between feeling lonely and being alone. With the lockdown, you could say there's a lot of people who are in fact alone, physically alone. There's nobody else there, but you can stay connected through, the Zoom chats, the Skype chats, the FaceTime chats, and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it's not a good replacement, but it helps hugely. And then you've got those that generally are lonely. They don't have those people they can be speaking to. They don't have those opportunities to connect because maybe they were previously connecting at the bakers, at the butchers, and the shops, going out and doing things, and now not being able to go out and do that has really cut that off for them. So the social aspect has been a huge part of the anxiety that comes with COVID. So those are just a few of the aspects that are really strong when it comes to looking at COVID anxiety. So now, how can we get over this? How can we deal with COVID anxiety? So one thing I would recommend is considering I want to invite you to consider using head trash clearance to help you. Head trash clearance is a potent clearance tool that can really help you to get rid of fears, anxieties and stresses very, very quickly. And it's what I use with my clients. It gets wonderful, wonderful results. And you can really start getting results, certainly on sort of broader anxiety. When I've worked with my clients on, general anxiety, they can start saying goodbye to their anxiety within a good few months, 2 or 3 months. But it does take clearance work. You don't just kind of show up and expect it to go away. You've got to do the clearance. You've got to clear it out. It's like having a house full of rubbish. It might take you, a week, 6 weeks, whatever, to chuck out everything in your house. But if you just sit on the sofa looking at the stuff, it's going to take forever, right? You've got to actually be emptying stuff out. And the same goes with our head trash. You've got to be taking the time to do the clearance work. And head trash clearance, the tool, will help you to do just that. Now, before I go on to talk through in a little bit more detail about how you can use head trash clearance to reduce your COVID anxiety, I just want to circle back quickly and talk a little bit about the judgment that we have around COVID, because there is a lot of judgment going on at the moment about what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, whether we agree with whatever government has decided to do, whether we disagree with whatever the government's decided to do, whether we're up for vaccines, not up for vaccines. I mean, there's so much debate and divisiveness and polarity going on around COVID that sometimes it's it's the judgment that's causing most of the anxiety, the disagreements, the conflict with family members, as opposed to the actual things themselves. It's all of that that's causing problems. So if that's part of your COVID anxiety, the fact that you can't feel that you can talk to good friends about it without it escalating into an argument because they don't see it the way that you see it. Maybe you're feeling deeply disappointed in good friends and family members in the way that they have responded to what's going on, and how now you're seeing this gulf, this big gap in the way that you see the world, and that's causing you disappointment. Maybe you feel hurt, maybe you feel distance from them now, and that's what's clouding the relationship. So I would invite you to consider those aspects of COVID as well that aren't really around the specifics of what I've been talking about, but are really around having people around you with very differing viewpoints and how any judgment comes into that. So let's just be clear what judgment is. It's really it's an opinion that is kind of very loaded emotionally. You can sort of discern and make decisions, but it's when there's all that emotion that comes with it that it kind of veers into judgment territory, and that can really make it difficult for relationships to survive if there's sort of a judgment going on. Anyway, so now I want to move on to giving you some head trash clearance tips for COVID anxiety. So as I mentioned, head trash clearance is a potent tool that you can use to get rid of your head trash. You can find out more, of course, at clearyourheadtrash.com. Now, so if you want to tackle your COVID anxiety, then what I want you to do is really revisit those aspects that I've talked about today and identify what it is about those things that bring up fear or anxiety for you. So, we talked about health anxiety. What is it around that you struggle with? Is it the doctors? Is it the injections? Is it the catching something? Is it not being able to recover? What is it around the health? Is it being ill? Is it pain? What is it that's coming up for you? And almost write a list of all the things that are bringing up fear or anxiety for you when it comes to some of those aspects. And looking at those headings can help you to kind of focus. So, looking at masks, what is it around masks that you're not comfortable with? What is it around health that triggers stress or anxiety for you? What is it around being bored and having no restrictions, not no restrictions, all the restrictions that we're facing? What is that doing to you? What are you struggling with specifically around the restrictions that are in place? What about the social aspect? Are you finding that you feel disconnected or isolated or lonely? What is it that you are worried about? And then more longer term, in terms of when I go back to the COVID life piece, the uncertainty that we're facing, the changes that we're experiencing and how change might be difficult for you, the uncertainty of the future. Maybe you don't like being told what to do because now you're being told that you have to wear a mask and you hate being told what to do. That's me, by the way. I hate being told what to do. So all of these can, once you get going with this list, you could have quite a list going. Now, I want to make this super easy for you. And so I've created a COVID anxiety pack, which contains all of the things that you need to do head trash clearance on the common aspects of COVID anxiety as I've identified them. And so what do you need to do head trash clearance? Well, when you want to clear your head trash, the first thing you need to do is know what you want to clear. So let's say you've got fear of injections, then injections will be the head trash that you want to get rid of. And then you need the head trash clearance script to get rid of the needle phobia. Or you need a head trash clearance track to get rid of the needle phobia. By the way, you can get both of those in the shop. So you either need the script, and if you want to write your own scripts, then all the instructions are provided for in my book, Clear Your Head Trash. So yeah, you need the script or the track. And then you just, or you work with somebody like me, a head trash coach. And that's how you get rid of your head trash. You work through your head trash clearance to do this. All the items that you'd have identified, you just work through those methodically until you feel great. And that who knows how long that's going to take for you. We're all in very different places. So I wouldn't like to sort of say, oh, you'll be able to do that, achieve this in X amount of time. But certainly when it comes to clearing one piece of head trash, that can take you anything from 10 minutes, half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. One of the clearance tracks that you'll find in the shop, they last around 45 minutes. When I do my own clearances, anything from 10 to 30 minutes, anything like that is what you need. And obviously you need to multiply that by all the things you need to clear. So if you've got 20, 30 things on your list, then you just need to multiply that out, right? That gives you a sense of how long this stuff can take you to do. But going back to the COVID anxiety pack, I've created a pack that's got all the clearance mantras that you need for the common themes that appear within COVID anxiety. And you can find that in the Head Trash shop. So you just go to clearyourheadtrash.com/shop and you can get it there. And also I've got all of the clearance mantras and tracks that you need inside the Clearance Club, which is our monthly membership where you can access a vault of Head Trash clearance tracks and mantras, all the scripts you need on a whole range of themes, life themes. So health stuff is in there. There are health, medical fears. There's COVID. There's a COVID section in there. There's, uncertainties and fear of the future, all of that stuff. So anything that's relevant to COVID is in the Clearance Club as well. So depending on how you like to, how you feel about wanting to clear your head trash, you might want to dive in and do COVID on its own. Or you might think, actually, I've got quite a bit of head trash I'd like to tackle. So maybe the Clearance Club might be better for you because there's more in there. And there's checklists and progress bars and all of that good stuff to really help to keep you motivated on your head trash clearance journey. Anyway, so I hope that today was useful for you in terms of hearing more about how you can tackle COVID anxiety. And if you have any questions, you know where I am. Just get in touch at clearyourheadtrash.com. Until next time, bye for now. Thanks for tuning in. You've just been listening to me, Alexia Leachman, here on The Head Trash Show. If you enjoyed the show or the book, Clear Your Head Trash, I'd really appreciate you leaving a review on iTunes or Amazon. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes for more insights, interviews and inspiration for clearing your head trash and reclaiming your headspace. Until next time, bye for now.